Welcome back to the Blender Basics video tutorial series. This video will focus on Chapter 7, Render Settings. My name is Jim Chronister, and again, the Blender Basics books can be downloaded from www.cdschools.org/cdhs. Look under Staff and find my name. It will direct you to all the Blender downloads and class files. Today we're going to focus on what do you actually need to do to be able to render out a picture or even to render out a simple animation. And we're going to look at some of those settings that are available for you. And in order to do this, we're going to open up our landscape scene from the last tutorial. So here's our landscape scene. If I hit F12, it looks great. I have a nice rendering here. And let's just say I wanted to save that as a picture that I could either save as a desktop background or email to somebody, save it as a simple JPEG image or PNG file or a bitmap image. There are a variety of different image files that you can use. And also, let's say I want to set the size of this also. So let's start looking at some of our render settings here. Right now, if I switch to a camera view, how does the computer know how big to make that camera setting? Well, if I look at my basic scene buttons over here, my render buttons and my scene buttons, if you look at the render buttons, here's the button to render out an image, and that is the same as me hitting F12 to render out an image. If I want to save an animation, I need to hit the animation button. And also, how do I know where when I hit F12 that viewport's going to show up for rendering? Maybe I want it to open up as a new window. Well, that's where you can choose these display options here and change it to whatever you want to. You can also choose which layers to render. I know we haven't really done much with layers yet, but layers are kind of a nice thing that you can work with and determine, which ones are going to be rendered, which ones won't be. This is our most important stuff here. If I close up all of these panels for the moment so that we can see everything that's going on. Dimensions, how big should our rendering be? That's the most important thing to start out with. Anti-aliasing. This is where you get to set the quality. Are you going to have a jagged edge to your picture, or is it going to be smooth? If anti-aliasing is off, and you hit F12 and render a picture, you're going to notice that the edges of things are kind of jagged and rough. It's not very smooth. So if we're going to sample it and make it look better, 8's usually the common number. And this is also a different model, how you can tell it to do your sampling. I usually keep things at the defaults. So yeah, anti-aliasing is something you always want to have turned on. Motion sample blur is something that's kind of useful if you wanted to animate something that has, say, a propeller of an airplane turning, and you want to show blur with it. This would be something that you could turn on. And basically what the computer is going to do is it's going to look at a few pictures before and a few frames after what you're trying to animate, and it'll blur it to show motion. So it's something you can always play with if you need to show something that is being blurred through speed. Shading is always a nice thing you want to check. By default, all of this stuff is turned on with the newest versions of Blender. But ray tracing is something that eats up a lot of memory, and we actually have a whole chapter devoted to ray tracing. Basically, ray tracing is what's giving you your shadows in most cases. It's also what's giving you mirror reflections and refraction, which is distortion through transparency. Ray tracing gives a nice sense of realism, but it's also very costly in render time. So something you may want to learn to turn on and off as you need to, and our shadow is going to be cast. Output. Where do you want this file to go, and what type of file do you want? We'll look at that here in just a minute. Performance. Again, tiles, how fast is it going to render? Post-processing, sequencer, compositor. We'll talk about both of these in a later chapter. Stamp is if you want to actually if you want something to show when this was made, kind of like having the date stamp on a picture, you could do some stuff with that. And baking is something we'll again talk about in a later chapter. So what we're most interested in right now are the dimensions. Now, most of the projects that I do and I have my students do, I use NTSC for 3 proportions, and that's basically what you would see when watching a DVD. So TV NTSC 4:3 is usually what I do, which is going to give you proportions of 720 by about 480 pixels. It's also going to give you a frame rate of about 30 frames a second, 29.97. Now, what I also like to do is determine, okay, that looks good. If I hit F12 now, and I render out a new picture, the proportions have been adjusted to match that for my picture. Let's say you're doing web content and you're trying to make a banner for a web page. Well, then you set your own X and Y resolution to whatever you want it to be. Okay, so that takes care of the basic stuff for sizing it. Time remapping, old map and new map. This is something where, let's say you find out you made your movie too long or too fast or too slow for animation. You can change these proportions. For example, let's say my movie's running way too fast, so I need to slow it down. I could change my new map to 200%. It would slow your movie down to half its speed. But then you would also have to double your end frame number to make sure that things match up with it. It's something that's kind of a nice feature in there. Alright, so now that I've determined my size, let's determine my output. What do I want my output to be? If I want to save a JPEG picture, I can click here where it says PNG, and here are all your different image formats and movie formats, and here's a JPEG. Okay, so now I would be saving something as a JPEG. Quality, we would take that up to 100%. If you were actually doing a movie, I would want to choose this, and by default we usually choose MPEG movies. And now this changes down here to encoding. And what you almost always want to do, if you try to make a movie right now, it might be a little blurry. I use DVD settings. And what that does is it resets everything back to exactly what we want for proportions and quality. MPEG 2, this would make you a movie that would just be ready to go to a video DVD. So again, under encoding, I change my preset to DVD. I'm set up to do TV NTSC for American and Japanese standard, a 4:3 ratio. But right now, I really just want to do a JPEG picture. So there we go. We set up for the JPEG picture. Now to render and save a JPEG picture is very easy. All I need to do is hit F12. It's rendering a picture for me. And now to save that picture, all I need to do is hit F3 on my keyboard, and wham, it brings me up to a save. So it's saying, where do you want to save this image? So I'm going to go my Blender Basics folder. I'm just going to call this lighthouse.jpg. It's always good to type your extensions in Blender, and either hit enter twice or hit save as image twice. The first time you hit enter sets the title, the second time would save it as a picture. So now if I go out to that folder, where do I have it? And it should show up in here. Let's see, right there it is, Lighthouse, and there's the picture I just saved. So it works out very well for us. Now, if you wanted to save a movie, again, just a couple of things that you would need to do to save a movie. NTSC, set your frames to see exactly where your frame range should be. Scroll down through here, make sure you have your anti-aliasing on. Make sure you have all of these settings on that you want to have on. Everything that you need with ray tracing and everything like that. You probably want to set this to an MPEG. You may want to go down to encoding and make sure you press DVD, and then tell it where to save the movie here, otherwise it won't know where to put it. So click on the little file folder. You would go out to wherever you would want to save a movie, say test.mpg for an MPEG movie, and then you would just need to go back up to the top and hit animate. And guess what? We haven't animated anything yet. So this is going to sit here and crunch out a bunch of frames and really not do anything. It'll tell you your current frame right here. It'll tell you how long it's taking to render out a single frame. And you would just let the whole thing run and let it go, and when it's all done, check it out to make sure that it's done what you wanted it to do. I'm just going to hit escape out so I don't have to watch the whole thing run. And that would be the end of this chapter. Thanks for